The object does not look dangerous. That is the first problem. It sits on a lacquer tray in a quiet palace room, a bowl, a cup, a box of powder, and a little burner letting out a thin line of scent. Nothing screams murder. Nothing looks like a weapon. But in a palace, danger does not need to arrive with a blade. It can smell like perfume. It can sit inside medicine. It can hide in makeup. It can be carried by a servant who does not know what she is carrying. And sometimes the only person who notices is someone with almost no power at all. That is why the Apothecary Diaries works so well. Its heroine, Maomao, is fictional. Her court is fictional. But the world that makes her attention believable is not empty fantasy. Imperial courts really did have inner palaces, strict rank, childbirth danger, cosmetics, perfumes, medicines, rumors, jealousies, and small domestic objects that could become life or death. The most frightening thing is how ordinary those objects are. A medicine bowl belongs beside a sickbed. Incense belongs in an elegant room. A cosmetic box belongs near a mirror. A meal belongs on a tray. The palace does not have to look like a battlefield for the stakes to be deadly. This is not the story of the real Maomao. There was no single historical woman who solves the show for us. The better question is more interesting. Why does a story about a low-ranking woman reading tiny clues inside a palace feel so historically plausible? What kind of world makes a powder box frightening? What kind of court makes a cup of medicine political? And in a place where everyone is watched, who is allowed to say what they have seen? The Apothecary Diaries is set in a fictional imperial court, but its atmosphere draws from a recognizable world: the palaces, ranks, medicines, perfumes, and courtly dangers of premodern China. Viewers often describe its setting as Tang-inspired, and that is a useful visual doorway, not a license to treat every scene as a documentary record. The series is not a secret archive. It is a story, but good historical fiction can reveal what a culture finds believable. The believable part here is not that one brilliant girl solved every mystery in an emperor's palace. The believable part is that an inner palace could be filled with information that official power did not always know how to read. Chinese medical culture had learned traditions, famous texts, and respected specialists. Court households could also depend on practical knowledge that lived closer to daily routine than to official books. Those two worlds were not always enemies, but they were not equal in status. A doctor might look at a symptom. A courtier might look at rank. A jealous rival might look at opportunity. But a servant who washed sheets, carried bowls, cleaned rooms, dressed hair, handled cosmetics, and heard whispers might notice something else: the timing of a fever, the smell of an incense, a rash under white powder, a medicine that was taken only after one visitor came, a noblewoman who suddenly stopped eating from a certain dish. These are not modern forensic fantasies. They are the kinds of observations that belong to people who live close to bodies and routines. That is the real historical energy behind the Apothecary Diaries. The drama is not only poison. The drama is attention. Inside a palace, the smallest clue can matter. But a clue has no power unless someone believes the person who speaks it. To understand the danger, start with the space. An imperial palace was not just a beautiful building. It was a machine for separation. Gates separated the ruler from the city. Walls separated official government from private life. Screens and curtains separated ranks of women from one another. Servants moved through spaces where powerful people were visible, but not always reachable. In that world, illness was never only illness. A sick consort could mean a private tragedy, a succession problem, a court rumor, or a political weapon. A pregnancy could be hope, danger, and competition at the same time. A child who became ill could turn a room of women into a battlefield of suspicion. This does not mean every palace sickness was poison. That would be lazy and false. Premodern courts had real disease, real childbirth risk, real infant mortality, and real limits to medical knowledge. But the palace made every uncertainty heavier. If someone became sick after a meal, who prepared it? Who touched the bowl? Who had access? Who benefited from fear? The palace also compressed private life into a public consequence. A headache, a rash, a miscarriage, or a loss of appetite might begin in the body, but it could quickly become a story about favor, succession, jealousy, or blame. Even ordinary care could become suspicious because care required access. The person who brings the medicine is close enough to help and close enough to harm. The person who changes the bedding may be invisible to rank, but visible to the evidence. The person who dresses hair or applies powder may know the skin better than an official who only hears a report. The inner palace was full of women, but not all women had the same power. Empresses, consorts, attendants, maids, entertainers, wet nurses, and older servants lived within a hierarchy that could be intimate and brutal at once. A person might know exactly what had changed in a room and still be too low-ranking to say it safely. That is why palace mystery is not only about hidden poison, it is about hidden speech. The walls do not only keep outsiders away, they also decide whose knowledge can move safely from one room to another. Now return to the tray. In a modern story, we want categories to stay clean. Medicine heals. Poison kills. Perfume decorates. Cosmetics beautify. Food nourishes, but in pre-modern palace life, those borders could be dangerously thin. The same plant might be used carefully as a remedy or feared in another dose. Minerals could appear in medicine, color, ritual, or beauty practice. Incense could change the mood of a room, cover a smell, mark status, or trigger suspicion. Cosmetic powders could create an ideal pale face, but some historical beauty substances across Eurasia, including lead-based whites in many cultures, could be harmful with repeated exposure. Cinnabar and vermilion reds carried associations of color, luxury, and alchemy, but mercury-bearing substances also remind us that beauty and danger often shared the same cabinet. Even the language of poison can mislead us if we make it too narrow. Poison is not only a vial slipped into a cup by a villain. It can also be dose, habit, contamination, ignorance, imitation, fashion, or desperation. A substance can be safe in one use and dangerous in another. A remedy can be trusted because it is old, expensive, or associated with rank, even when the body answers differently. Palace luxury increased the risk of confusion because the most dangerous things could be beautiful. A bright pigment, a rare scent, a costly mineral, a foreign ingredient, a fashionable powder, a recipe copied from someone important, each one could arrive wrapped in authority. This does not mean every ancient cosmetic was a deliberate weapon. It means palace material culture was intimate with the body. Substances touched skin, lips, hair, lungs, and stomachs. They were handled by women who may not have written medical treatises, but who knew what a powder looked like when it clumped, what a normal scent smelled like, what a fever felt like under the hand, and what changed after a new medicine arrived. The danger of the object is that it can be ordinary. A bowl of medicine belongs in a sick room. A scent belongs in a chamber. Makeup belongs on a dressing table. That is what makes the question sharp. If harm hides inside ordinary care, who can tell the difference. Official histories often preserve the names of emperors, ministers, and great physicians more easily than the names of women who cleaned, nursed, dressed, mixed, carried, and watched. But palace life depended on those women. A maid could know which cup a consort preferred. An attendant could know when a noblewoman stopped sleeping. A wet nurse could know the rhythm of a child's body. A midwife or older palace woman could know what childbirth looked like when it went wrong. A servant who emptied a basin could see what no official wanted to discuss. This kind of knowledge is not glamorous, but it is powerful. It is practical, repetitive, and close to the body. It comes from doing the work every day. It also comes from memory. Someone remembers that the same perfume made another woman cough. Someone remembers that a powder was changed after a gift arrived. Someone remembers which servant was nervous, which jar was moved, which room smelled different after the screens were closed. In a palace, memory itself can be a medical instrument. That is why the Apothecary Diaries gives its heroine such a compelling position. Maomao is not powerful because she outranks everyone. She is powerful because she notices what rank teaches other people to ignore. The historical point is broader than one character. In many court societies, women in enclosed or domestic spaces carried forms of expertise that did not always become official authority. They knew recipes, pregnancy risks, household remedies, cosmetic routines, scent habits, and the social choreography of rooms. Yet knowing is not the same as being believed. A low-ranking woman could be useful and disposable at the same time. She might be summoned when her knowledge was needed, then silenced when that knowledge embarrassed someone above her. That tension is the emotional core of this episode. The palace needs the people who notice. It also fears what they might notice, remember, and quietly connect. The most dangerous moment in a palace mystery is not always the discovery. It is the explanation. A rash can be seen. A smell can be noticed. A bowl can be examined. But once someone says this was not an accident, the object becomes an accusation. And an accusation has rank. If a powerful consort is involved, the truth is dangerous. If a favorite servant handled the medicine, the truth is dangerous. If the emperor's household looks careless, the truth is dangerous. Even a correct observation can become a threat to the person who makes it. That is why the best palace mysteries are not simple puzzles. They are social traps. A person with low status must decide how much truth can be spoken, to whom, and in what form. Too little truth and someone may die. Too much truth and the speaker may be punished for disturbing the order. The smartest speech in a palace may not be the loudest speech. It may be indirect, careful, almost deniable. A question instead of an accusation. A warning delivered through a superior. A suggestion that lets someone powerful reach the conclusion while keeping the low-ranking observer alive. This is where the history behind the fiction becomes most compelling. Pre-modern courts were not modern crime labs waiting for evidence to win. They were human hierarchies. Evidence moved through rank, favor, fear, and reputation. A medicine bowl did not speak for itself. A powder did not accuse anyone by existing. Someone had to interpret it. Someone had to make the interpretation survive the room. That is why the object-led structure matters. The cup, the scent, the powder, and the tray are not just props. They are tests of power. They ask whether a palace can recognize truth when truth arrives from below. Return to the object on the tray. At the beginning, it looked small. By now, it has become a map of the palace. The bowl leads to medicine. The scent leads to status and secrecy. The powder leads to beauty and danger. The hand that carries it leads to hidden labor. The silence around it leads to rank. That is the true history behind the Apothecary Diaries. Not a real Maomao. Not a single hidden case file. Not a claim that every palace illness was poison. The truth is quieter and more useful. In a world built on walls, screens, and hierarchy, survival could depend on people who saw what others dismissed as domestic detail. A servant's memory. An older woman's experience. The smell of a room. A child's skin. A cup placed slightly out of habit. The great palace drama was not only who held power. It was who understood the small things power depended on. That is why a fictional apothecary can feel so real. She stands at the point where medicine, rumor, beauty, fear, and class all touch the same object. She also reminds us of everyone historical records tend to blur. The women who washed, carried, mixed, watched, and remembered, even when no official chronicles stopped to name them. The palace may belong to emperors and consorts, but its secrets often pass through the hands of people who are barely recorded. They notice and they remember. They understand that a room has a normal smell, that a sickbed has a normal rhythm, that a bowl has a normal place, and that danger often begins when normal things are slightly wrong. And sometimes, if the room allows it, they speak.